All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at a figure that I am a pretty big fan of. This is the 2010 Transformers Generations Cybertronian Bumblebee, which is basically, based on his War for Cybertron video game design. And yeah, it's a Cybertronian version of Bumblebee. I absolutely adore this vehicle mode. It looks like an avocado mixed with like a Tron cycle or something like that. I love all the little red techie detailing that goes through it, and the translucent red that the wheels are made out of with the painted yellow rims. I think it looks super cool. He's a little bit more like gold than yellow, but that's pretty accurate to how it was in the game, because everything had, kind of like metallic-y overtones and stuff like that. And I think it works relatively well. It's certainly, I think, more yellow-like than like the orange that we see sometimes nowadays. But yeah, it's just a really adorable little vehicle mode. It rolls nicely. The one thing about this figure is that it is kind of not really in scale with much of anything, because I don't have the Cybertronian, Optimus or Megatron, but basically the four of them that came out during Generations during that time were Optimus, Megatron, Soundwave, and Bumblebee, and they're all pretty much the same height. So, you'd want Megatron and Optimus to be a lot bigger, and you'd want Bumblebee to be a lot smaller, but having him stand next to them just doesn't really look good, I don't think, but whatever. Either way, as a standalone figure in and of himself, I think he's a really fun toy. He comes with this little pistol here, which is pretty accurate to how it looked in the game. It's maybe a little bit smaller than it was in the game, but I think that's okay. And it actually does have weapon storage in vehicle mode. There's a little weirdly shaped tab back here that corresponds with this slot on the gun. So you can take it and just... It's kind of hard to get it in there sometimes, but once you get it actually tabbed in, it stays very securely, completely unobtrusively underneath the car, no issue, and that's just fantastic because we don't do that with a bunch of modern toys nowadays. And with the Cybertronian vehicles, theoretically, there's like even less of a need for that because they don't have to disguise or anything. But it's really nice that they, are able to include the weapon and not break up the look of the alt mode, which I think is really important, at least to me. But yeah, no, looks pretty nice in this mode. It's very satisfying to just roll him back and forth because he does roll quite nicely. When this figure came out, a lot of people had issues with saying that the transformation was really fiddly and hard to get him tabbed in. I never have really had an issue with this figure. I think you just have to pay specific attention to where all the little tabs and stuff are supposed to lock in, because there's a few things in here that if you're not I'll talk about it during the transformation, but there's a few things in here that is if you're not paying close attention, it might seem like you're doing it right, but then it'll screw it up later. So it just takes a little bit of care and paying attention to what you're doing when you're transforming it, I think. So which I kind of enjoy. I don't think it's a difficult transformation. It's just one that you have to kind of pay attention to. And, I'll talk about that along the way. But if you get everything locked in, I think it all sits pretty nicely like this. But yeah, in terms of comparisons for the standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe, and, we don't really know how that scale works because he's a Cybertronian vehicle, so he can be whatever size, but I would imagine he should be, quite a bit smaller, but either way, that's what they look like together, just for a modern average size deluxe. For another War for Cybertron figure, here he is with Soundwave. Again, they're about the same size, and you'd think that Soundwave should be a bit bigger, but that's what they look like. For another Cybertronian Bumblebee, here he is with the Origins Bumblebee from Buzzworthy Bumblebee, which is more based on his Cybertronian G1 design rather than this one, which is, much more designed from the ground up. And, I think it's cool to see the two of them together and how the different approaches were, kind of captured of the different Cybertronian modes for Bumblebee. And then for some more Bumblebees, here he is with Netflix Bumblebee, Classics Bumblebee, and G1 Bumblebee, just so you can see what he looks like with them. Again, scale is nothing because he can be whatever size he needs to be, but I would like to see kind of apparently they're doing a new version of this guy in Studio Series. They're going to start moving to doing video game designs in the Studio Series, which is pretty cool. So I think it would be cool to see a version of him that's kind of designed to be more like the size of him. I know people would have issues with him being like that small for a deluxe, like we have issues with him every time a new version of this mold comes out. But in terms of scale, I think it would be a lot cooler to see a much smaller version of this guy. But yeah, in terms of transformation, you don't actually have to remove the weapon if you don't want to. It stays there throughout the entire transformation, and that's where it stores in robot mode as well, which I really appreciate, because like I don't mind when you have to like move the weapon around for transformation, but if it can stay in the same place, I think that's great. That's like ideal for it to store in the same place unobtrusively in both modes. I think that's like ideal for you to just be able to forget about it if you don't care about it, and then have him be able to take it out when he actually needs to go into battle. But yeah, first thing you want to do is just untab this whole back section here. It untabs from these little sections here, which will become kind of part of the feet mechanism. So you just want to take this whole shell up like this, and then take this black panel in the middle. And again, I think this is super cool that when you adjust this panel, it's actually like, you know, the stripe on the car is a separate panel rather than, you know, the panel being irrelevant to where the black actually ends up. I think that's super cool, but just to loosen it up, you want to do that for now. And you kind of just let this section kind of flop around for the time being. Then for these sections, there's a little hook tab that hooks over this, or I guess the hook tab is on the wheel section that hooks into here. So you just want to adjust this. Just be careful so you're getting around that hook tab on both sides. And then you can untab the feet here. They tab into the arm panels. Do that on both sides, and then you can take this entire section and fold it down until it clicks into place just like that. And then for the leg transformation, first thing you want to do is take this little gray armature in here, and you just want to push it in so it extends out like that, which then creates the space that you can compress the wheel in, and then take this whole section and rotate it around like this, and then take the wheel or the foot here, and it kind of sits underneath the wheel, so the wheel sits inside the foot. And then this panel right here comes and closes around the wheel, and then you kind of just straighten out the leg to have it, you know, be fully extended out. And I think that's a super cool leg transformation to actually, you know, get the wheel inside of the foot without doing any cheating or anything like that, and have it be actually, you know, marginally stable. I think that's super cool. But yeah, then for the arm transformation, you want to take these panels in the front here and just untab them and then double hinge them back onto the arms themselves, just like that. Then unfold the arms here, bring it out to the side, rotate it at the bicep. Just do that on both sides here. Then before we adjust with the backpack, we want to take this panel here and press it in, and it's got the head in there, which, you know, sometimes gets misaligned. You just want to line it up so it can actually clear that front panel there, and just flip it up like that. And then the head is on a little hinge that folds back just like that. And then for the backpack, you basically just want to compress it up like that. And then this black piece has a slot that tabs into this armature section right here. And then you want to bring it all down. There's a little tab on this gray armature section that goes into that panel there. And then you want to press it up so it kind of like, you know, sits into the body. And there we have War for Cybertron Bumblebee in his robot mode. And yeah, I think he looks pretty good for the most part. He looks fairly accurate to his design from the actual game. The one part about his robot mode that I think is a little bit awkward is just how his hands are like at this weird sort of like angle out to the side. In some poses, it doesn't look so bad when he's in like dynamic poses, but if you're just having him like sit candidly, it does look a little bit weird that his hands are just like always pressed in like that. But otherwise, I think it works. He's got a nice head sculpt here, very youthful looking, and again, very accurate to the game. I love all this detail here. I guess maybe these could be considered cheating because like that's where these panels end up in vehicle mode. So it sort of feels like they're implying that these actually shrink down to be part of the chest, but I don't know if you could say that for sure, especially since these are just like out in the open and visible in this mode. So whatever. But yeah, I think he looks pretty good. In terms of articulation, the head is on a ball joint, and then for transformation, it also has that, you know, hinge, so it can kind of hinge up and look right down onto his chest like that, and obviously rotate around. The shoulders are on ball joints, so they can rotate around like that, and then you get a little bit of movement out of that transformation joint, having it go back. but it's not super helpful. He's got a bicep swivel for transformation. He's got a double jointed elbow. His wrists are on ball joints, but they pretty much only get like a rotations range there. The waist is on a swivel, although it kind of bumps into the backpack, so it doesn't really get a ton of range, but it's there. The hips can go forward and back and out to the side. Unfortunately, this joint doesn't like lock in super tightly, so it kind of wiggles around while you're moving stuff around, but it's got a thigh swivel, a little under 90 degrees of bend at the knee there, unfortunately. And then nothing really at the feet. I mean, his feet technically are on ball joints, so they can kind of like extend up and rotate around, but I guess you can kind of use like the forward ankle tilt, but that's really it. You don't really get a ton of side tilt, but that's okay. In terms of weaponry, obviously you can take out his little pistol from his backpack here. And I will say that the backpack, well, I don't know. I was going to say it sits better when you don't have the pistol in there, but actually not really. But you can put that in his hand, and I think that that works pretty well. Like I said, it's a little bit smaller than his gun for the gun in the game, but I think it works well enough, and especially since like Bumblebee as like a scout, character, I feel like him having a smaller gun makes sense. But if you don't want to just use the gun, he also has on both of his arms, he's got these little click out clear plastic blades, these little like stinger blades that you can flip out, and I think that looks super cool. Again, in the actual game itself, these were a bit longer, but as just little like dagger weapons, I think it works pretty well, and I think that's pretty cool. And again, it's more weapons that are just completely unobtrusive in both modes that hide away without any sort of negative effect on the figure, and I appreciate that a whole lot. In terms of comparisons, here he is again with Kingdom's Sideswipe, and you can see, this is kind of where I have my biggest issue with the figure, is that he's kind of enormous for a deluxe, especially for a deluxe of Bumblebee. So he hardly scales with anybody, but that's what he looks like with a average size deluxe. He was fairly tall for the time too. I mean, certainly, less so than compared to modern figures, but still. Here he is again with Soundwave, also from War for Cybertron, who's about the same height. He's a little bit taller than Soundwave. Again, you can see, like, aside from just height, his head is much bigger because he's proportioned to be a shorter guy. So it doesn't really look good, I don't think, with the figures he's kind of meant to go with either. And then here he is with, let's do all of our Bumblebees at once. Here's Origins Bumblebee, Netflix Bumblebee, Classics Bumblebee, and G1 Bumblebee. Just you can see him with a few other options there, just towering over everybody. But yeah, he's a good figure. I just don't think that he works super well, kind of like scaled with anybody, at least as of right now, unless you're, there's probably like some third-party versions of like the War for Cybertron Prime that are just enormous that I think he'd probably scale okay with. But in terms of official figures, I don't think he really like fits in with anybody, but on his own, he's a nice figure. And then, usually this is kind of where I'd end off the review, but I do kind of want to show off the reverse transformation for a change, just because this figure is kind of infamous for being difficult to go back into vehicle mode, and I just don't really understand why. Like, there's a few tabs that you kind of have to pay special attention to, like I said earlier, but otherwise I don't think it's that difficult, really. So I figured I'd just show it off real quickly. But first thing you want to do is just take the backpack and kind of unfold it like this. And again, we're just going to kind of leave that hanging out for now. Take the head. First thing you want to do is when you're bringing this down, you want to bring the head down on that joint, and you want to like take special care to kind of push it through. Actually, you kind of don't want to actually use the hinge joint here. You kind of want to just leave it how it is and then just press it through like that and then bring it the rest of the way, because it ends up in the same place either way. The hinge is just to make it easier to kind of get through there. And then for the arms, which I think is probably the place that most people kind of screwed up at, is you want to bring it down here and then rotate it back down in the bicep. And there's this little tab on his forearm that actually goes, I will admit it's kind of annoying to have this flopping around a lot of the time, but it goes into this slot right here on the shoulder, and it's actually like super important that lines up, because if it doesn't, then it kind of like messes with things in the like the placement in vehicle mode, and it can be easy to not tab it in like that because it tabs up mostly fine without that being tabbed in, and because it's a double hinge, it doesn't just do that automatically. But you want to make sure that that tab goes in, because that is actually pretty important for having everything lined up. But then yeah, just do that on both sides, which again, it's not like difficult to do. It's just something that you have to like pay attention to when you're doing it. And then you can take these panels and fold them back up, and they'll just lock in like that. Honestly, what I usually like to do is I like to just like compress this up like this so it flops around less. But then for the legs here, you just want to fold all of this back around. You kind of want the foot here to sit over the hinge that this gold panel is on. You want to spread out the wheel and then, you know, hinge it up right there so that you can compress this back in and lock it into place just like that. Do that on both sides. And then the feet don't actually tab together, but you do want them sitting together. And then when you untab this, you just want to bring this up. And if you've done everything right, just pay attention to this little hook, because you know, you don't want to accidentally snap that off. But if you've done everything right, just get it around that hook, and you can basically just pull it in so that it hooks around there, and then tab it in up here. Again, on both sides. Just make sure everything is sitting okay, which it looks like it is. And then when you unfold this panel, just, you know, make sure that this panel is kind of sitting on that side. Bring it up like that, and then just bring it down, and you can just kind of compress this section into here, lock it into place, and then clip it in right there. Clip it in right there. And there we have him in his vehicle mode. Didn't even need to take the weapon out. It's not that bad. It's just got a few tabs, I think, that you have to pay attention to when you're actually, you know, like putting it in the vehicle mode, because like, especially those tabs where the arms plug into the shoulders, it would be easy to like not notice that those aren't tabbed in, because when you double hinge the arm around, like it sits mostly flush, but if it just sits not flush enough, then this won't actually sit together, and it'll have like some weird gaps up here and stuff like that. And there's even a few gaps that are kind of there anyway, but I feel like the panel lining works well on this figure just because, you know, it's a pretty panely car anyway. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to him. I don't think that transformation is that hard. Certainly not as hard as as infamous as this figure is for having a pain transformation. But I don't know, just takes a bit of care, I think. But yeah, if you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Generations Cybertronian Bumblebee from the War for Cybertron design.